Here to talk about all of that and how it affects your wallet, Dan Geltrude is an adjunct professor from Montclair State University.
Good morning.
Welcome. So can you start out with gas prices, lay it all out for us?
Sure. So there are seasonal rises in gas prices. So as we start to get to the warmer weather in spring and summer, of course, gas prices are going to go up. So when you're already starting with prices on the rise, that's not a great sign. Now, let's take some other factors into account here. So because this administration has decided that we're going to be more reliant on foreign energy than domestic energy, that puts us in a position to be reliant on others to dictate how much we're going to have to spend on gas. Now, we see that oil is hitting $85 a barrel at this point and probably going higher. And the administration recognizes where this is going because they've made a decision for now not to refill our reserves, because they know if they start doing that, gas prices are going to go even higher. So this is not a secret as to what's happening, and it's really bad energy policy.
You know what, Dan? I'm just going to say this in front of all of our viewers. I love you. And let me tell you why. I love CPAs. I don't like tax preparers. I love CPAs. Why? Because CPAs, they don't just sit there, ask you questions to fill out a form. They're also there to give you advice on what to do next year to reduce your tax liability, get some cost savings. So what can you tell our viewers? It's too late for 2023.
Too late.
But we still have time in 2024, Dan. So from your perspective, for the average working class American, what are some tax breaks? What are some strategies that they can employ so that way next year's check could be even bigger?
Sure. So it's all about strategy, John, right? So that involves planning ahead. So yes, 23, well, that's passed us by, other than being able to make that IRA contribution before the due date of April 15th. So there is one last thing we can do. But when we're looking into the current year in 24, there's a lot of people out there that are working in the gig economy, right? Having multiple jobs and getting 1099s. So what I'm going to tell you is this. If you're one of those people out there that's in the gig economy and you're getting a 1099, you want to set up a Schedule C on your tax return. And what that means is you have your own business. And because you have your own business, you can deduct business-related expenses against that gig income. That's really important. So what do you have to do? You have to make sure that you're saving all of those receipts and keeping track of all the money you're spending in order to support that gig job that you're working at. You get to reduce it. It's totally legal. It's totally fair. And don't let those things pass you by. Why pay more tax than you legally have to?
That's a really good suggestion. So that includes maybe commutation expenses, does it? How about home office expenses, right?
That's
Give
exactly
us some more
it.
examples.
Those are all things that if you're a W-2 employee just working at your job, that you cannot deduct any of those costs. However, when you're a 1099 worker, which means you're basically in business for yourself, yes, it's the home office. Yes, it's travel expenses. Yes, it's supplies. It also potentially could be meals and entertainment. So all the things that a regular business could deduct, you could be eligible to deduct all those expenses. And people don't know that. They'll treat 1099 income purely as W-2 income. They're not the same, Betsy.
Exactly. And to add, let me actually say this, add this to your point with regard to the gig economy. Many of them, they have to use their cell phone. Wait a second. Do you mean the cell phone bill could be deducted? Wow. So everybody's ears, they're ringing.
Yep.
Yes, they are. Yes, and that's a great example, right? So
It is.
anything that relates to being able to communicate in being able to support that income, yes, that's deductible. So the thing people need to know, and this is not a shameless plug, by the way, they really need to talk to a professional to say, hey, what can I
right.
what can I
CPA.
deduct?
Right.
So I want to ask you a question about another topic that's on many people's minds. At least the Democrats, the Biden administration, are hoping it's on many people's minds, and that is the cost of prescription drugs. Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, held a big press conference yesterday. They're trying to make drug prices a key issue in the election. They're trying to distract people from other things like the southern border and say, no, healthcare costs are the biggest issue. We're going to cap prescription drug prices for seniors and take many other steps. It was very, they vilified the drug companies over and over again during this press conference. Not surprising for Bernie Sanders. Tell us what you thought and tell us what you think of this issue as the election approaches.
Well, I want to be fair here and say there's two sides to this situation. So let's focus in on the prices. Yeah, the prices for drugs are high. And in some cases, unfortunately, people can't afford them. So that is problematic. However, excuse me, you can't turn around and just vilify the drug manufacturers. And let me tell you why. Bernie Sanders turns around and basically says, oh, look how much it costs to make this drug, and they're charging so much more. What he's not taking into account there is all the research and development costs that these drug companies have to put into ultimately developing these drugs. When you're talking about breakthrough drugs, that just doesn't happen. It's not cheap. If it did, we would have breakthrough drugs every day. It takes a long time to do the research, and that costs money. And these drug companies need to be able to pass that along within the price of the drug itself. So there's two sides to this story, and they're only focusing in on one point of this.
Right, because he doesn't want to actually address the cost as well as the legislation that many of these drug companies could take up to 10 to 15 years to develop that drug.
Right.
So that's a lot of expenses over that 10 to 15 year period. But let's pivot a little bit. Here's an eye-opener. A new study shows Americans who are asked to think about what they need for retirement. They need nearly $1.5 million in their nest egg to retire comfortably. That's a record, Dan. This is the average amount that the U.S. adults have saved for retirement has reportedly dipped to just over $88,000.
Wow.
That's a Dan,
That's a big shortfall.
How do you make up for that gap between $88,000 and $1.5 million?
Well, that's a gap you can't fill if you're close to retirement, of course. But here's really the message that needs to be taken away on that point. If you are a younger worker and you're entering the workforce, you cannot have a mindset on, I can't wait to retire and then I'm going to collect from the government. You need to assume there's not going to be any Social Security. So what it really means is don't focus in on minimum wage. Focus in on your career and hustling and how much money you can make and save to be self-reliant over that time. And on top of that, early retirement, that's not going to work. We are living longer, and the longer you live, the more money you need. So I think people really have to focus in on, I better do something I love because I'm going to be doing it for a long time.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Don't think you're going to stop working when you're 65. Ain't happening.
Exactly. And like you said, Dan, start early. Why? Because time is money. You know, we always appreciate you, Dan. And I tell people you should definitely have someone you love in your life and a CPA.
Maybe it could be the same person.
And if it's the same person, you're truly blessed. Thanks for joining First Edition, Dan.
Thank you.
The day's